8 ways SJWs and leftists will defend Islam in conversation. Hey, it's Prince of Queens, and obviously the Islam and Muslim conversations are a hot topic right now. And while I cannot say I am necessarily an expert on the subject, I have noticed that it is basically impossible to have an honest conversation about Islam in leftist spheres, which is most of my friends' circle. I try to learn, and it's impossible to even discuss it. I'm not saying that right wing people are completely honest or knowledgeable about Islam and Muslims themselves, as it isn't hard to get them to say that they basically just want to nuke the entire Middle East when it comes down to it, even if they haven't studied the religion. However, as somebody who has been left leaning my entire life, it seems like left wing people are incapable of having productive discussions about Islam. Here are some things I've noticed that they tend to do when you attempt to talk honestly about the subject. The first way even normally logical leftists will defend Islam is obviously by comparing it to Christianity. They'll say that the Bible has passages that are like that too. Even though I have never really heard about the part of the Bible that demands that women keep themselves covered all the time to remain pure, or the part about the Bible that advocates for female genital mutilation. There might be some grisly parts of the Bible in terms of gay people and slavery, but even if this was an apt comparison, that's not what we were talking about. Which brings me to the second way that leftists will defend Islam, which is blatant avoidance of actually talking about it at all. This tendency is so extreme that you can post a Facebook status update asking your friends what they think about Islamic extremism and whether it can be compatible with feminism in the West, which I did just yesterday, and people will comment with the sole purpose of trying to make the conversation about something else. Sometimes anything else. They'll say, well, there's lots of things that are oppressive to women to worry about. I mean, sure, maybe Islamic women are oppressed, but so are women who are kidnapped by sex traffickers and sold into sex slavery. So why aren't you talking about that, huh? That was literally a response I got. The third thing they'll do to try to defend Islam is another avoidance tactic, which is to somehow try to steer the conversation into being related to Black people and Black Lives Matter. I think that the reason social justice warriors do this is because, to them, they literally believe that the world is divided into two categories, the oppressed and the privileged. They think that Black people are basically interchangeable with Muslim people anyway. So even though you were trying to talk about gay people being executed in some Muslim countries, they still think it's appropriate to talk about Black people being executed by police in our own country every day. If you think about it, it's kind of racist and homophobic to just go ahead and lump those two things together in such a way. But of course, social justice warriors are total bigots, and if you haven't noticed that by now, I urge you to keep that in mind in the coming months as you observe their behavior. The fourth thing people will say to defend Islam is that Muslims are only violent and hate America because we keep bombing them and stealing their oil. Which is the adult who is talking about politics version of a kid telling their parents that he started it in relation to his brother. But for some reason in this metaphor, the kid, which would be the leftist, is saying, I started it! My brother is only hitting me because I hit him first! This is a weird thing to say by itself because, well, he's still hitting you. And Islamic extremists are killing people in the West quite regularly. But more so, if you actually look at the religious texts of the Quran, there's a lot of precedent for why this has happened all throughout history since Islam became a thing. True, perhaps there's a possibility that if they didn't keep getting bombed, they would form nice, stylish, secular societies like people say was true in Iran prior to the 1980s or whatever. But we don't know that because it hasn't happened, and Islamic extremism has been killing a lot of people in Western nations over the past few years. You can't deny that. The fifth way leftists will defend Islam is by saying that they know Islamic people and they were totally nice, which is basically as if to say that their actual religion doesn't really have any influence on them trying to convert people into being Muslims by any means necessary, at least from their experience. Or maybe it's just that the leftist saying this just doesn't really know anything about what the Quran actually says and the various different ways in which the Muslim faith instructs people to take over the world. The sixth way leftists refuse to talk about Islam is by saying that they think that the real problem is something, anything, which is yet another form of avoidance. They'll say that they think the real problem right now is our economy, or climate change, or Russia. There's always a bigger problem than Islam, even though we know it is a growing problem in the West statistically. The seventh way leftists defend Islam is by saying that there is already extremely harsh vetting standards for immigrants through Muslim majority countries, so it's hard to get in anyway if you're a refugee. And that might very well be true. There might be some perfectly wonderful people being kept from immigrating into the USA, and while I really wish there was a way to read everybody's mind and know who is worth letting in, we don't have that capability, and the USA is not obligated to take any risks by letting in potential terrorists. Even if I wanted to, nothing I could say would change this, no matter who doesn't get let in. I can't say I'm sorry about that. That's just how things are. The eighth and final way I have noticed that leftists will defend Islam is to guilt trip you and somehow make the conversation about the Jews and World War II. You know, now that we're on the topic of immigration. God, do they ever love to make it all about the Jews. Like, as if Judaism and Islam are all that similar, or like Jewish people were frequently massacring people in the 1930s or something. I think the obvious reason that people are doing this is because we look back at World War II and the Holocaust, and everybody can agree that this was tragic. And we all know at least a few Jewish people, and to think about not helping them and their people is absolutely abhorrent. But, well, last time I checked, people of the Islamic faith are not particularly fond of Jewish people anyway, so when people compare the two in this way as if they have a bunch in common because they both are virtuous victims, it's always kind of awkward to me personally. Okay, that's all for tonight. Drop me a comment. Please start supporting me on Patreon, or I swear I will stop making videos, and stay tuned.